I'm your host today, and we'll be talking to Carolyn Jennings Thompson. Mrs. Carolyn Jennings Thompson is the Democratic Party nominee for North Carolina Court of Appeals judge for seat 8. And today we're going to allow her to present herself to you, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for tuning in. You can find us here on the Awesome Radio app 24 hours a day. You can also find us on Facebook where you can like, share, and comment. You can find us on the web at our website and listen in at www.wbisawesomeradio.org. So without further delay, please allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you Mrs. Carolyn Jennings Thompson, the Democratic Party nominee for North Carolina Court of Appeals, Judge Seat 8. Greetings. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce myself to you and your listeners.
Well, it is a pleasure indeed. Well, I'd like for you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background and some personal effects that you might like the audience to know prior to going into the questions that we have for you today.
Sure. Thank you again for the opportunity. I am Carolyn Thompson. I'm on the ballot as the only candidate for seat number 8 on the Court of Appeals race with prior judicial experience, having 26 years under my belt as a trial attorney, district court judge, and superior court judge here in the 9th Judicial District, which covers Vance, Granville, Warren, Franklin, Person counties. This particular seat is open because Judge Inman is now running for the Supreme Court. And I understand from your introduction that I am, in fact, the nominee for the Democratic Party, but I don't want that to be the primary issue before the voters, because courts need to be nonpartisan. Courts should be nonpartisan. And in fact, any time that I've ever presided in a case, I've never asked the parties, are you a Democrat or Republican or an independent or whatever, because people are on the ballot. People's cases are on the bench. Just to give you some background for educational purposes, I'm a Hampton University grad, Bachelor of Arts in Sociology with an emphasis in criminal justice. I then obtained my Juris Doctorate from North Carolina Central University School of Law, and I've completed 2 years of my master's in divinity at Shaw University, and I'm also a licensed and ordained minister. But I haven't just sat on the bench or argued in front of the bench as a trial attorney. I've remained very active in my community here in the 9th Judicial District, volunteering, mentoring young people. In fact, I currently serve for over 10 years now as a volunteer teen court judge. And if you don't know about that program, it's a second chance that the kids get when they are in trouble in school or get in trouble in the community. And they come through the teen court program as a diversion away from the criminal justice system and having to go through the delinquency court and the criminal process. On a personal note,
since you mentioned that program, I do have a question that would apply to that. I read that in your biography, and I am very aware of teen court.
Great.
I am a mediator myself. Are there any numbers that has proven that program effective? What is your take on that and how effective it is? Or is it just a great way to orient children or young people to the court system and sort of prevent them from going any farther in the system? But what is the strength of that program? Because I love the fact that you were in it.
Well, I can tell you, I don't know the data. That's not data driven for me as a servant leader in my community. All I can tell you is that the kids who come through the program, it works. And I've been at it for over 10 years now. So there's got to be something true about it when the kids come back and complete the program. And because they were not forced down the path of the criminal justice system where you catch a charge and it's always on your record and you can't get away from under it, and they come back through and they thank the teen court program for the opportunity to save themselves and their families from a long generational curse of being in the criminal justice system. So the actual data, I'll leave that to the directors and those who seek funding from resources and the stakeholders in the community to keep the program going. All I know is I believe in it, and I believe in the kids who participate.
With violent crime, particularly in youth violence, let's look at that aspect. and it's perceived to be at a crisis level by a lot of experts. What, if any, do you believe is an appropriate role for you in the judiciary system in addressing this perceived crisis? When you're on the bench, do you show more empathy? Do you lean towards the root cause in sentencing? What is your take from that position?
As I have presided over juvenile court, so much so that the Administrative Office of Courts designated me certified in the area of juvenile delinquency court. And when I presided over juvenile court, I take the holistic approach. If you're getting in trouble in class, I want to know the next question. What happened to little Johnny the night before that he can't get somewhere and sit down on the day that he has to go to school? I come from the stakeholder position, like what in the community can we do to help these kids and their families? And then in this stage of time, that a lot of kids are being raised by their grandparents for whatever reason. And so they may not have the tools and the equipment to deal with a teenager like back in the day when they were raising their own kids. And so I take the holistic approach to make sure the family unit, and even if they don't have a family unit, find a structure for them to be able to thrive, walk, talk, and chew when they leave the court system or when they get out of school. So as a juvenile court judge, I can tell you my approach is to get to the heart of the matter, because kids come in this world a clean slate. It's what we put on their plate that affects them.
This is a cultural question and not a cultural specific question when it comes to people that are interested in what the problem may be, what the root cause is. What do you believe are the causes of the high rates of minority incarceration?
I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer to that. There are many reasons. There's a reason that they can tell you at the third grade level how many jails you need to build in your community. There's a reason that at the ninth grade, they can determine whether or not you're going to be successful, because we have a lot of high impact on the dropout level at the ninth grade. There's a gap between pushing for the educational success of a child to the ninth grade. There's a gap where somewhere we lose sight of they still need hands-on. And the school system's crisis right now, not having teachers who need more pay to really be invested in these large classroom settings that we have. So I don't think that there's I know that there's not a cookie cutter answer. There's not one for all that fits the bill for why these things are happening.
Now, my following questions may not have the greatest continuity that you would expect, but they're going to challenge you, or perhaps challenge you a bit in the order that they are presented. If you become aware of unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate in a case in which you are presiding, how would you handle it? And do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct?
Well, absolutely. Not just the judge, but anybody in the courtroom. The state bar has a way that you can report misconduct of anyone in the courtroom that's practicing law or presiding. We have the judicial code for the judges. And I can tell you what I have done as a district court judge. When I have seen maybe an attorney not coming in prepared, I will call that attorney not out in public, because you still have the integrity of the court system that you don't want to embarrass or disrupt the flow, if you will, of the courtroom. And so I've had an opportunity to call attorneys up to the bar and say, it's apparent to me if you walk in here with a piece of paper and the lawyers over there have a box, boxes as tall as they are, somebody's not ready in this room, and it's a disservice to your client. I'm going to give you continuance to be ready to go, and let's go on my new day of continuance. Or in a district court criminal matter, any given day, sitting in court, it could be a Jennings family reunion. All right. And so if I see the district attorney, and I have seen this happen before, the same exact charge, similar situations, but one gets the plea offer, maybe the pro se or the unrepresented couldn't get. And yeah, I have called them out on it and say, well, what happened with this situation that this person wasn't given the same opportunity? And so I'm not afraid to challenge the injustice, because that's what we're there for. The scales of justice must be equal without peeping through the lens covering the eyes of justice.
So, is there any other things that you have done that you consider an effective way of improving court procedures and the efficiency of thereof? And are there any other methods or formal methods that you're going to present elected in office in order to improve the efficiency of court?
Again, I'm going to tell you about the experience that I have had as a district court judge. We are a small town, a small rural community, and so we don't have the big court systems like you would in Wake County that has a designated family court, a designated this kind of court. So we operate from shoestring budget to have the 6 judges that we have on the bench and limited courtroom and limited court time. So as a district court judge out the gate in 2009, I recognized that domestic violence victims were sitting in the room all day long with their alleged abusers, sitting right in close proximity. In that same docket, we were hearing custody cases, divorce cases, juvenile delinquency, and then somehow we get to domestic violence cases. Well, if you know anything about domestic violence cases, they have a timeline that you must have a return on to keep the case going. And oftentimes we weren't able to get to the domestic violence cases. So the victims would have to leave the courtroom, come back on another day and hope to be heard after sitting there all day. And if you understand that domestic violence victims, when they get away from their alleged abusers and they are out in the community, it becomes more lethal for them to be away from their safety and their shelter. So I went to our district court chief and I said, I will volunteer to hold 50B court or domestic violence court so that we can carve out that particular issue and have a separate court date for those issues so that we're timely doing the orders and also putting more protections in the courtroom for the domestic violence victim. And so we did that as a pilot kind of court for about 3 to 6 months. And then finally it was instituted as a separate type of court in our district. And I'm proud to say that it was because I recognize it as a domestic violence advocate and awareness advocate that victims have no business sitting in the same courtroom that long and still not getting heard and putting themselves in harm's way and getting to the courtroom. That's a long way to say, yeah, I've done that.
Do you believe that all citizens have adequate access to legal help in the legal system? And if not, what can be done to provide wider and better access?
Well, no, I think that is the crux to why we have the pro se or the unrepresented or the underrepresented community versus those who can write the check and pay for the attorney. So it is in fact an obstacle in most cases in dealing with the high priced criminal representation cases. When you can afford to pay someone to get your son out and pay the $100,000 bail in addition to the attorney's fees versus the one who's sitting in jail because they're indigent and can't make bond and they're sitting and waiting, being smoked out in jail, waiting for a court date that may come within 6 months or not. So the cost of court or the perception that you must have an attorney to get things done, we've got to deal with that because the court belongs to the people. It belongs to the community. And we should not have it one way because you can afford an attorney and you can't on the other side.
I believe these next couple of questions will be related to your character. And I believe that the community would adore hearing some of the things that you think of yourself. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night thinking about a case and wishing you had handled something differently? And if so, please describe one of those situations.
Yes, the cases involving children always will stick with me. The images of abused children, because in addition to being a private practice attorney, in 2000 and telling my age, 1999, I became the DSS attorney for Vance County, and that required me to prosecute the abuse, neglect, and dependency cases for children, as well as the non-supportive children. And I remember specifically this particular case, the parents, when we used to call it Willie M, but it had some severe mental challenges. And these children were found in a crib with bottles of curdled milk and left with the animals in the house to babysit them.
Oh,
And it was just a nightmare case for a long time, for the department to go through the process of getting these children to stable homes. And I remember, fighting tooth and nail in it. And then after obtaining the termination of parental rights trial, I came into the office over the weekend, and the back of my office was shot up by, we believe, but can't prove that had something to do with that case. And then, of course, there's the other cases where I've made a decision to help a young lady who was in the mental health hospital, and her parents were very adamant about she could come home. We're done. We're finished with her. And she'd been in a mental health institution for a number of years, pretty much growing up in the institution on behind locked doors. And I wanted to give her that chance to prove. So we went months and months of transitioning her out of the mental health hospital. And she had gotten to a place of thriving again. And I'll never forget, I was on the bench, and the person who was representing her as her attorney came into the courtroom, and I didn't understand why. And she was, bawling and tearing in my chambers. And she said that young lady had gone to the top of the building and stepped off of it. And so, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it all in district court and superior court. And that's why it's important to pray for discernment, not just because, but I always want to make sure I'm making the right decision.
are there any specific cases or types of cases in which now that you find it necessary to disqualify yourself?
Well, I think recusal in any situation, when you're asked to be removed from a case because you might know someone or have an association with someone. I mean, again, I'm in rural America, so everybody knows everybody, and most of the people go to the same church. And I could be in Walmart, and I say, hey, we just got out of church together. So if I feel like it would give the perception that I could not be fair because I know this person or they're familiar. And of course, being a preacher, I also go to churches and I'm preaching, and people might remember something. So I'm mindful of the close ties in the community, and will stay away from it if it gives an appearance to the opposing party that I somehow would not be able to fair. I don't have any problems being recused, because I want people to know that they can have a fair day. And I can tell you, I will be fair and impartial. But if you're not feeling me like that, then I'm good to just recuse.
This is not a partisan question I'm about to ask, but who are your judicial role models, and maybe why?
Well, I would say, well, there's several. So, being the first female and the first African American to serve in the capacity of Superior Court judge in 2018, it was a historical moment. I mean, we packed out the courthouse to watch history unfold. And in that moment, I was surrounded by a lot of my mentors who raised me up, if you will, in the legal system. And I think about Judge Elaine O'Neill, who swore me in, gave me the oath. And now she's the first African American female mayor in Durham County. And she would leave notes on the desk for me as a Superior Court judge because I took her office in Durham County, and she would leave envelopes of things to encourage me. I think about her. I think about Judge J. Henry Banks, who was the chief here in the 9th Judicial District, who basically was my mentor to give me guidance in developing my craft as a district court judge. I think about Sherry Beasley, who is our former Supreme Court Justice. And when I told her about my decision to run, and she's always been a phone call away just to ask her for her opinion about how to handle this. And one of the things she said to me was like, make sure you take care of home, because running a statewide campaign will be hard. And then I think about Justice Timmons Goodson, who, I argued my first Supreme Court case in front of, and I thought that I'd done such a terrible job. The lawyers on the other side were stacked high with corporate looking attorneys, and there I am, just me. And so I left feeling defeated, and so she had her clerk to run after me and find me at the elevator and wrote me a note on a sticky note. Great job. You held your own, looking for great things from you. And I still have that in a frame on my bookcase. And then I think about, Justice Jackson, who just went through this grueling process. And I look at her and I think, my goodness, this woman sat in that chair for all of us who one day aspire to be higher and think higher than what the political rhetoric would bring to the table. So I'm sorry, that's a long way to say that I'm covered.
Right. I see. I see. All right. Let me ask you this question that may be a question the audience may listening or watching now or at a later time. What are the pros and cons of going to the bench as compared to practicing law? I mean, I think I'd like to know that question. Is there a different, you feel like an eagle on a mountain when you're, in that?
Well, I can tell you, I mean, it's rewarding on both sides. As an attorney, when a person brings you their problems and they trust you to get some answers from the court, that's a humbling but yet a powerful moment that you can be a part of the answer that they've been looking for. It's just that at my age, I'm 54 now, and I think I've done my time and paid my fine, as my mama would say, and I'm not going to be in a place where I'm just running after every little case here and there. I feel like at this point, when people come to you as an attorney, they recognize your skill and your reputation in the community to be a fighter. A quote from Toby Finch, bulldog, that he's called me as. And so, but then on the judicial side of it, at 40, when I decided to run for the district court seat in Vance County, at the 9th Judicial District, you recognize that there's only so much you can do for your clients. And the power of the pen helps to dictate how other cases will be heard and dealt with in your community. And so they have their rewards. But the other side of it is it's on this level of the appellate fight of this race, it sets the precedence for how the lower courts will handle those same type of cases. And sometimes it is in fact the last rule, the last final say on how cases will be heard, similar to the one that you issue a ruling on.
You declare to uphold the laws and the Constitution and to stand by your oath to pledge to protect our democracy. Speaking of protecting our democracy, what is your perception of protecting our right to vote at the polls without intimidation or without interruption this coming election?
Well, and let me add another kink to that question, please. For the ones who are listening, who has decided my vote does not matter, then my answer is to you as well. We need you at the table to come. If you've left the table and given up on the system of voting, we need you back at the table, because decisions are being made about not just you, but your niece, your nephews, your family members. Every issue that we're faced with right now, or be it popular because it's a federal ruling or a local sheriff's race, everything that's happening, justice is on this ballot, and it affects our households and the right to vote. When I think about how my mom shared with me when she was a young girl, and she sat at the countertop in Danville, Virginia, and got smacked because she was sitting in the wrong place. Or I think about my grandmother who took me to Woolworths, and I didn't even know then that we were actually doing a silent sit-in or protest, because I was like 5, 6 years old. And she dressed me up in all my finest, but she would never order anything but just order, something for me to eat. The sacrifices that they've made, or my grandparents who would have loved to have had this opportunity to get up on early voting day and be the first at the gate. These things have to be protected. Otherwise, why would it be so much going on about suppressing the vote?
Okay, so you've done well. We have a few moments. I have some questions to ask that will appeal to your future and my future if you are elected as one of our judges. What is your vision for the future of the judicial system, and what changes would you advocate, and what changes would you expect to see?
Well, when you say advocate, I want to just be clear that when you say advocate, you're talking about policy, legislative, statutory. That's the legislative branch. And the judicial branch is being a separate entity, a separate branch of government. We can't get out here. And that's why it's hard to get people to know to vote for judges, because we're limited in what we can say that we will do, because then you're not getting a fair day. You're not getting your impartial judge. If I've already made up my mind on this particular issue, that's not equal justice. That's not upholding our Constitution. That's not enforcing our laws or interpreting our laws. But we have to do so with clear eyes, not rose-colored eyes or shaded because of the rhetoric. We have to look toward justice for everybody, regardless of who you are and where you come from. And so I would hope that at some point we wouldn't have to designate, like you've got in my name around the banner down there, Democrat. I'm telling you that I'm going to be fair and impartial and be the experienced candidate for the position, regardless of party affiliation. But that's how the legislative branch has decided to handle our judicial races, and it's for them to change that rule. So that's one of the things I would like to see, to go back to being a nonpartisan judicial candidate.
Absolutely beautiful response. Before we get ready to close, I'll give you a chance to close before we close. Are there some particular points that you want to share to make sure the audience knows your name?
Absolutely. In this race, seat number 8, I am the only candidate with prior trial and judicial experience. And with all the things that are coming through the court system come January 1, we cannot afford to have a training day experience to deal with what in the world was going on in district court when it got appealed, what in the world was going on in superior court when it got appealed. It's a difference in being in the trenches and understanding the process of court, and then just writing opinions or researching opinions for other judges to sign off on. Having that experience makes me the qualified candidate for this position.
What has been one of your greatest accomplishments, and how would you like to be remembered for your service?
I would like to be remembered as a champion for the least of us. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about domestic violence awareness, because a lot of times we will never see those who couldn't make it to the courtroom for fear of being on that power wheel and not being able to get off enough to say enough is enough and today is my day. I am, in fact, proud of the ministry that God has given me, which is called Abigail's Veil, because it deals with domestic violence awareness in the faith community. And because we who are holding the mic on Sunday mornings are often re-victimizing, and we really don't even understand that we're doing it. And so I'd like my legacy, if you will, to be that I was.
We are the station that brings you inspiration for the family and ministry teaching for practical Christian living. Awesome Radio.
With SRN News, I'm Jason Walker.
I can't hear you.
I would like to give her a closing question. So, Ms. Carolyn Jennings Thompson, we are now still on Facebook Live, and I would like to ask you one final question. How would you present yourself to a young person or a person aspiring to be in your position to follow their dreams and work within the judicial system?
I would tell them that no matter what anyone says, if you have a dream, if you have that vision of where you want to be, fight for it. Don't allow any circumstance or anyone to change your mind about it. In fact, the hardships and the obstacles, use them as stepping stones for where you want to go. If I had listened to my elementary teacher who told me I couldn't be an attorney, that I might want to consider being a nurse or a teacher, because at that time there weren't any lawyers that would look like me. If I had listened to her, Lord knows where I would be. But I'm thankful that this girl from Danville, Virginia, raised by a single mom, and still fighting the good fight, I can tell the young people, if I can do it, if through all that I've been through in my lifetime, you too can do it.
All right. Thank you very much. It has been an honor and a pleasure. We truly hope God blesses your campaign and your vision for the state of North Carolina. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're going to end the broadcast at this moment.